So, Rebel Moon Part 1 was a treat, wasn't it? And while I could toss up a 10-minute review and call it a day, it wouldn't leave enough room to communicate the very specific issues I had with the film. But I also don't want to do my usual in-depth review where I explore a specific theme, because the only theme that comes to mind here is how movie be not bad. So I decided to do a hybrid of the two where I talk you through what I did and didn't like in a yes or no format. And none of that he did a Star Wars crap, because I don't care what the movie was trying to be, I only care what it is. Welcome to Stream Come True, where nothing is spoiler-free. So the film opens with a lovely shot of space, my favorite place I've never been, and a bit of narration, which should serve as a brief, intriguing setup for what's to come. Now, I promise I won't nitpick everything in the film this hard, but the first bite of a dish sets the tone of the meal, folks, so I'm going to eat this up. The narrator says that on the Motherworld, 1,000 kings ruled unchallenged in succession. I'm sorry, what? How long do they reign? 3 months? Because I get that 1,000 sounds good. It's a very dramatic number, and the narrator is a very dramatic actor. But if a king rules unchallenged, then passes the crown to his heir, it implies that he ruled for the length of his life. So now I'm picturing a kingdom that's somehow been putzing around with the same power structure for like 80,000 years? Tell me that story, okay? How did that happen? Because I feel like that's more interesting than whatever I'm about to watch. Anyway, the Motherworld depleted all of its resources, so it sent its troops out into space to command and conquer Windows 95. Until one day, the king got murked, giving some of the conquered planets funny ideas about rebelling. Then a senator, and you'll notice I'm still going, this is still the narrator's story, but a senator named Belisarius, because of course he is, seized power to become regent. And he sent his top commander to snuff out any flames of revolution. Cue the title, Rebel Moon. So I assume there's a moon with some rebels on it. Now, much like this video, that intro could have been twice as interesting and half as long if they stuck to what we needed to know. And if the accompanying footage didn't look like a PS1 cinematic. If there's one thing Snyder gets, it's how to make something pretty, so I'm not sure why he didn't at least opt to have more compelling imagery here, better correlated to the narration, but the narration itself could have been tighter. Does it matter that they had 1,000 kings? Does it matter that Brachiosaurus was a senator who made himself regent? Not really. It does matter, however, that they viciously conquered worlds, because it explains why people want to rebel, which explains why they care about rebels. Now, the pan down from the title to the moon is a hard yes. I love that it had a graphic novel quality to it, and I appreciate it as a stylish transition away from phallic spaceship 9.mp4. The dirt sniffing, on the other hand, was no. I liked the shots, it was the pacing that didn't work. Cora, played by Sofia Boutella, goes directly from yoinking a stone out of the ground to stroking the soil, and it felt oddly hurried. I would have liked to see her reflect on her work before molesting the ground. And I found that a lot of shots in this film lingered on the wrong thing at the wrong time or for the wrong length, which happens here. She's huffing the soil too long, and her love interest Gunnar, played by Michiel Huisman, who I definitely didn't call Michiel Huisman before looking it up, is watching her too long. Then we see her staring, then him watching again, then her staring again, only from a different angle this time. The film in general suffers from this strange dichotomy of feeling both slow and rushed, but we're not even 5 minutes in yet, so I'll cut it some slack. Also, what are the seasons here? Because Gunnar mentions a snow elk. Is this winter? Never mind, because it's party time in the long house where everyone's dancing a jig to an Irishy, Scottishy folk song. And if there's one thing movies have taught me, it's that even on another planet, that's the music of the poor. The pacing of this scene is no as well, because Cora is talking to Haagen-Dazs, played by Ingvar Sigurdsson, with an extra S for dessert, when she mentions that something is impressive. Why is his response so drawn out?
And yes, it's quite impressive.
Which one? The animal? Or... or the hunter?
You already said "or" 10 minutes ago, sir. So we've had the hinted love interest and the gathering to establish community. Now we get a peek into Cora's backstory. Hagen is doing his best as a surrogate father to marry her off to Den, because he's the best hunter in the village and the best room in the house, which is when we learn that she's not from there. The dialogue in this scene is half no, but let's watch it so I can explain why.
You know, the 2 seasons I've spent here have given me happiness that I don't deserve. But understand I am a child of war. To truly love and be loved, I I don't know if I'm capable of either.
Now, I think she should have stopped there. We've established that she has a troubled past, raised in the fog of war, incapable of loving or being loved, and believing that she doesn't deserve the happiness her new home brings. And that would have been a full yes, but she kept going.
The very idea of love, of family, was beaten out of me. I was taught that love is weakness.
Right. File all of that away for later, because it's a new day, folks. The sun is shining, birds are singing, and seeds are falling. Now, I won't harp on the fact that Snyder loves his slow-mo, because it's mentioned every time anyone discusses his style. But I will say that when Rebel Moon first released, a short popped up in my recommendations where he said that he uses slow motion to allow appropriate time to take in what's happening. Something to that effect. Now, that's all dandy as candy, Zach. The problem is when there's a disconnect between what the filmmaker thinks is deserving of extra attention and what the viewer actually takes from it. This 1-second close-up of Cora spreading seeds, what was I meant to glean from it? Was it as impactful as a slow-motion close-up of her dropping them less than a minute later? Doubtful. But this is no time for questions because a warship peekaboos out of the clouds and Cora alerts the village. This is very yes, because when Sindri asks what they want, Cora says everything. It sets the stakes in a single word, and it establishes her prominence in the town, because despite only living there for 2 seasons, one of which may or may not be winter, Sindri values her counsel, and that's important to keep in mind for what happens next. Sindri and Gunnar are having a tiff. While Sindri sees the warship as a threat, probably something to do with it being a warship, Gunnar sees it as an opportunity for profit. He thinks they should partner with the Motherworld by selling them grain, to which Cora responds, "Nein!" She makes it clear that a Motherworld warship brings nothing but pain, advising that they give only what they ask for and volunteer nothing more. Sindri defers to her guidance, not Gunnar's, and the villagers follow suit. This shot is yes, by the way, because what can I say? I love science fiction, and I love that distorted, whiny rumble they always use for vehicles. It's like a VHS tape angrily rewinding underwater. Enter the space Nazis and the main protag, Atticus Noble, played by Ed Skrein, who I hesitate to say looks the part, because what does that mean when the part is basically a brown shirt? Also, he played Bora in Maleficent Mistress of Evil, which I reviewed right here on the channel. So this whole thing is a yes. I like how he's introduced, there's sufficient tension, Sindri's head is shiny, no complaints. It was also an effective use of slow motion. It added a little gravitas to their arrival, while avoiding the fact that everyone looks ridiculous walking down a ramp in real time. Now, in case you can't guess what happens, Atticus asks for grain to feed his troops, but Sindri lies, saying they don't have any to spare. And in a moment of contrived stupidity, Gunnar says, "Nah, bro, we've got grains for days," which results in Atticus sending Sindri to the sleepy time place. Also, his wife gets whomped with a lightsaber. I'm sorry, I meant a Kryptonian blade. So this was a yes. Granted, the dialogue was so on the nose you could call it a bridge, given that Atticus literally said he wants everything, but the stakes that were set were met, and we got to see the destructive nature of the Motherworld firsthand. So Atticus rolls out, and he leaves some of his soldiers behind to keep tabs on the villagers. I don't care about the soldiers at all. They spend a lot of time making angry man noises, but Robot Jimmy is all the yes. His design is great, his movements are surprisingly human-like without losing that robotic quality, and the effects when he's splashing in the water are crisp. Jimmy is hands down the best-looking thing in this film, and the only character I'm invested in so far. He's also voiced by the same very dramatic actor, Anthony Hopkins, which begs the question, is Jimmy the narrator? Moving on, Water Girl Sam, played by Charlotte Maggie, comes watering over to Jimmy with her water bucket, and it's here that we learn the story of the slain king. Sort of. The king had a daughter named Issa, a name I simply cannot say without picturing Jar Jar Binks, who was prophesied to usher in an age of peace and compassion. But she was killed along with the king and queen by someone they trusted most, which I'm sure is not going to come into play later. And not only is this a yes, it's one of the few scenes in the film that I thought was perfect. The writing, delivery, everything hit its mark, and according to my calculations, yes plus yes equals yes, yes. My neighbor's car agrees. Back to the Village of the Damned, the townies are trying to decide what to do about the soldiers, and this was a solid no, because I don't think they reacted strongly enough to the fact that their dear leader and his wife are dead now because Gunnar went against the community's wishes. There's no sense of gravity to his actions, and that persists even after this scene. It's like he cooked a turkey too long. And I was especially disappointed to see zero hostility from Den, because the film set him up as a rival love interest for Korra, yet they never explored that dynamic. There was no friction between him and Gunnar because there weren't any scenes between them. Den was barely given any screen time at all, and what little screen time he had was spent standing around like the 6'2" Scottish specimen he is, going, "Hey, so this would have been the perfect time to pit them against one another. To have the big, strong hunter who, by definition, kills for the good of the village, threaten Gunnar's life for causing the death of their leader. Instead, he's the weakest voice in the room. Not only does he ignore Gunnar entirely, he advocates for falling on the mercy of the soldiers by farming real good. While that characterization is admittedly refreshing, it doesn't ring true. And if you're not going to flesh a character out, he might as well be stock. So have Den be the one raring for a fight, and Gunnar be the one who again, in his naive cowardice, argues for kissing up to the Motherworld. Better he double down on his flaw than everyone else suddenly share it. Also, what is with their accents? I understand that the actors are from all over the place, but for the sake of feeling like a town that's been together for years, they could have reined some of that in. Sindri sounds like he's doing his best Viking impression. Sam sounds like she's on holiday from Ozzy Hogwarts. This one sounds like she's from Wakanda. Alternate universe Natalie Dormer is very upset. Regardless, seeing that the village is in over its head, Korra decides to hightail it out of there, and Hagen tries to convince her to stay, giving us another hint at her backstory when he mentions having found her in the wreckage of a ship. This scene is yes, because I haven't said so yet, but Sophia's performance has been pretty great so far, and her fear, her apprehension in this scene is pretty convincing. It says a lot about what she's been through, and about what Hagen and the other residents of Velt don't understand. The Motherworld isn't some intruder they can reason with. It's the Reaper, and death will have its harvest. So it's here that Hagen plants the seeds, thankfully not in slow motion, for the premise of the film. If they can't beat the Motherworld alone, why not find rebels to fight alongside them? Cut to Water Girl Sam, water-girling in the middle of the night with her plot bucket when the soldiers get rapey, prompting Korra to abandon her escape to rescue Sam instead. Though, I can't imagine why Sam would need help. Clearly, she's a witch. Look at how she shapeshifts in midair. It's almost like it was a completely different person better suited to being thrown on the ground. There's a budding romance subplot between Sam and a young soldier, by the way, so he's there, but it doesn't matter. What does matter is that Korra is ready to chop some wood. And by wood, I mean soldiers. And by chop, I mean shoot. So I'm torn on the yes and no here. The way Korra says stop, call me R.L. Stein, cause I've got goosebumps. But I'm picky about scenes where one or two good guys dispatch a dozen bad guys. If it's not believable, it should look cool, and this sequence fell a bit shy of both. The momentum was very start and stop, and it nearly fell victim to the trope of enemies waiting their turn to get their ass beat. Overall, though, I'd say it was good. Anyway, since the movie takes a nosedive from here, I want to state for the record that this is my favorite shot in the film. It's established that the Jimmy bots no longer fight, so when Jimmy shows up and the commander tells him to kill everyone, he hesitates before choosing to kill the commander. I love the way it's framed with Jimmy off to the side in what's essentially the background, because that's not where your eyes would typically be drawn, allowing the moment to pass without fully catching it first, which I think fits the emotional tone of the scene. But what I like most goes back to Jimmy's design. While he does have two lights that mimic eyes, there's no emotional expression, and I find something deeply affecting about how blank and motionless he is when he pulls the trigger. It wouldn't have landed the same at all had they given him a face that emotes like a human. 10 yes out of yes would yes again. So off Jimmy trots to the end of the film while we're stuck in the middle. The bad news is that it gets pretty awful, guys. But the good news is that it's so awful, my yeses and nos are much quicker. With Motherworld blood on their hands, fighting is no longer optional, so Korra gears up to head out in search of rebels to recruit. And the fact that Gunnar is just there like nothing happened is a huge no. Was it too much to ask that they shun him at least? The only consequence he faced for what he set in motion is that he feels bad about it. Had the villagers punished him, it would have strengthened his arc, because he'd have to redeem himself in their eyes, not just his own. He also has ties to the rebels that might help Korra find them, so she asks him to come along. And that annoys me because of course he'll go. He's in love with her, and he wants to make things right. if they had locked him up, or Den threatened to roast his chestnuts on an open fire, and he begged Cora to go, using his connections as leverage, it would have muddied his motivations. Was he helping just to save his own hide, or for the good of his people? Watching him evolve from selfish to selfless would have been much better than the empty salt shaker posing as a character we got instead. And can we not with this Uraki nonsense? If you can have an elk on a sci-fi moon, you can have a horse. No one would question it, and if someone did, it wouldn't be the only thing they did. Anyway, it's dark now, and submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, I call this one The Legend of Cora, as she gives Gunnar the dumpiest exposition of all. When she was a child, Buenos Aires came to her planet. He was a ruthless general then, pillaging and plundering. You know how he do. And this montage is both yes and no. After her family was killed, Cora bravely faced Belladonna with a gun she took off a dead fighter. And this is the yes part because it's ambiguous. Did Bellatrix Lestrange let Cora pull the trigger because he was so spent from all of the bloodshed, so heavy from the weight of his lust for power, that he low-key wanted to end it all the only way his ego would allow? Or did he let her pull the trigger because he knew the gun wasn't loaded? You'll notice that the gun she picked up has a red light, it isn't subtle, and it's always visible. Scary red mean bad for temperature hot, but quantity for empty. Or, putting it another way, it likely means the gun was out of ammo. So in my opinion, the gun was useless, but Cora didn't know because she pulled the trigger fully intending it to fire. The question is if Frafi knew, and I'm not making fun of his name this time, the actor's name is actually Frafi, which is very fun to say. But the reason I like this scene so much is that the ambiguity of it is bolstered by his performance. If you didn't notice the light on the gun, or didn't think anything of it, all you'd see is his trembling welcoming of death. And if you did notice the light, you'd see masterful manipulation, because there's no way a decorated general who cocked the gun for her wouldn't know what that light means. Very good scene. Sadly, the rest of Cora's exposition was a no. Following the gun fail, Belisarius took her in as his daughter and protege, renamed her Arthelaus, which I absolutely will not be repeating, and over time she became a skilled soldier for the Motherworld and a friend of the royals. Now, remember how I told you to file something away? Listen to what she says.
At the Academy Militarium, they encouraged us to find a lover. Someone we would defend with our lives when the politics of expansion became too abstract, and the why of the conquest was lost in the sheer savagery of combat.
Excuse me? Didn't you say like 10 minutes into the film that the very idea of love and family was beaten out of you? And didn't you say you were taught that love is a weakness? By who, pray tell? Because you just said the military academy of all things taught you that love is a strength, so much so that they ordered you to find a mate.
I was taught that love is weakness. And I don't know how that will ever change.
I do, with inconsistent writing. So I haven't commented much on the visuals as far as quality is concerned, and that's because it's the least of this movie's problems. The stagey environments, dodgy CGI, it's what makes the film look bad, but it's not why the film is bad. Overuse of slow-mo? No. Costume design? Yes. This shot? Yes. And with story time over, Cora and Gunnar make it to their first destination. They see these bounty hunters that look like blue Urukai, and this is a yes, because that spider contraption that snatches people up and carries them for you is fantastic. Snatch me up a man, am I right? Then imprison him. Also, I know it looks more like a scorpion than a spider. I just like saying spider. But I don't like this dialogue, because Cora asks Gunnar if he has a way to contact the Blood Axes, the main rebel group they're seeking. And he says no, then proceeds to tell her where they are and who with. Maybe I'm the banana split, but I'm pretty sure that's a way to contact someone, knowing where they are and who with. I get what he was trying to say, but we don't try here, streamers. We do. Also, had they gone with my example of having Gunnar use his connections as a get-out-of-velt-free card, they could have later revealed that he didn't have a way to contact the rebels directly after all, only a vague idea of where they might be. Him exaggerating his ties out of desperation would have said a lot more about him than having his ties conveniently march out of frame. Now there's a cantina scene where some I don't cares happen. There's an I don't care over there and over there, and I don't care in slow motion. There's this guy who looks so out of place. It's like the dude from Song of the South time travel to find a place where black isn't seen as the worst color. Then there's this guy who's just hard to look at, really. But I'll give him a yes for grossing me out. So codename Kids Next Cora learns the whereabouts of another rebel on her list, a former general of the realm named Titus who turned his troops against the Motherworld. This exchange is no, because it's supposed to be kind of playful and charming, basically me, and it's not.
So he's on Pollux.
That's your plan?
That's my plan. What?
Guess we need to find a ship to take us to Pollux.
You're catching on.
To what? The fact that you have to go where the person is that you're trying to find them, the fact that you need a ship to get there, or the fact that he shouldn't question you about it. Is he that dense that this was a breakthrough in your dynamic, going along with your plan to not try jumping really hard to get off the moon? Actually, maybe he is that dense, because even after everything that happened, he still said, I get why they kill Sindri, but would they really kill us? Oy, this man is a chore. Just a basket of laundry waiting to be folded. Enter Kai, played by Charlie Honeybee Hunnam, a self-proclaimed opportunist who agrees to take them to Pollux in his ship. I'd give it a yes because he's cute, but I'm a serious person. So off they fly to see John Carter on Mars or something, and I personally give every filmmaker permission to just not have someone say woo when they pilot a ship. No one says woo unless they're watching their K-pop bias body roll or on a coaster plummeting to what might be their death, because they don't know, some of them malfunction. Then we get a glimpse at Atticus being ick. He's looking for the blood axes and got a lead on them. Good for him. Good for him and his holes. Our trio arrives at New Adi, where they talk to a sweaty man named Tarek, played by Stas Nair. They invite him to join their cause, but he can't leave without his debt being paid, so his overseer poses a deal. If he can tame Big Bird, he's free to go, but if he can't, all of them become his slaves. This is a supernova, because I don't know why on Velt's green Earth they'd agree to that, unless Cora secretly knew who Tarek was, and that he was either worth the risk, or that there'd be no risk because of his skills, or because she had a foolproof plan to escape either way. None of that seemed to be the case. It was just, hey, can we have this half-naked guy? I'll risk 3 lives for him. But fine. He tames the bird, it's a whole thing, and the speech he gives to calm it down is kind of absurd. Imagine telling a rampaging grizzly that you both know fear, but the thing you fear most is yourselves. No. What strange baggage to project onto an animal. And I know it's fiction, but even within the context of the universe, I feel like I can guarantee with a fair amount of certainty that this griffin thing isn't peering into its reflection at night, mulling over how the real slaver is inside him. It also gets extra nose for Tarek removing the shackle from its neck in a display of trust, only to immediately slap a rope around its face and get on top of it. I suppose I could give the creature a yes for reacting accordingly by trying to smash him into the side of a cliff, but even that was ruined by slow motion. What is this shot? You'd think they were looking at a volcanic eruption spewing fire and brimstone in their direction, something so surprising or dangerous it made their pupils dilate. But you know what they were looking at? More cliff. I feel like I'm losing my mind, and I swear to God, if someone says, actually it was because of the plateau, you're a plateau. Now, I don't know how long I've been recording, but my gut tells me it's time for an intermission. So why don't you take a second to like the video, de-liquid your bladder, and come back after you've washed your hands. Everyone ready? Nice. With Taraka-like-a-ding-dong's debt paid, our heroes head to another dirt ball in the sky, and they're immediately in a lift with a woman in a Party City witch hat named Nemesis, played by Duna Bay, a fabled assassin who spends most of her fight with Queen of the Borg Spider Edition losing. I'd say the spider's motivations were a strong yes, but it's a no to the clunky fight choreo and to the predictable sentiment when it ends that this isn't something to celebrate. But also kind of yes, because on a personal note, I agree that revenge can lead you down a pitiful path, at the end of which may be your grave. Beep beep, back into space, off you go into side character storage, Nemesis. Go on, scoot. No character development for you or establishing group dynamics. It's time for more exposition with Cora and friends.
I was just trying to help.
Yes, but it's not natural for some.
It is for you. Back home, you saved Sam without hesitation.
She did the exact opposite, Gunner. Water Girl Sam screamed her head off for at least 3 water buckets worth of minutes before Cora decided to help. That's a no for being misinformed. So we find out that Korra was promoted to the Motherworld's Royal Guard, where she served as Princess Issa's protector in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And we learn that Issa was named after an ancient queen said to be a life giver, which Korra thought was a myth until Issa did a magic. Now, this scene is yes because I just think it's funny. The way it was shot, I pictured Korra asking Issa what she's doing over there, and Issa saying, "Nothing." "Are you sure? Because it looks like you're trying to bring a dead bird back to life." "No, I'm just sitting here." "Then why is there a divine resonance according to the subtitles, Issa?" "I did it." Also, no to this lens distortion, I guess? I don't remember what it's called or if it's called anything, but it adds this bullseye curvature to the frame, giving the background what looks like radial motion blur. I noticed it here and there in the film, and while it looks great in some shots like this one, it's really distracting in others. Beep beep, new place, they're on Pollux now, and they find Titus, played by what is definitely not a Digimon, Jaimon Hansu, with just so much filth on him. And this is a no because I hate to say it, but his acting leaves a lot to be desired. Now, I don't know what's going on with this man because it was the same thing in the last few movies I've seen him in, and I know he can act. I've seen it. Where is it? So Korra's like, blah, and he is like, blah. So she says, why not join us to get revenge? And Tarek's like, oh no, Nemesis said revenge is bad. Then Titus takes 20 years to stand up, and we're off again. This time to Sharon, where Devra, played by Cleopatra Coleman, and her Blood Axe Rebellion are hiding out under the care of fleshy-faced King Levitica. Full disclosure, when the ship's door opened, I actually said, hey, black girl magic, because I had long since arrived at a point with this film where I had to make my own entertainment out of it. It is not good. So they tell the Blood Axes they need help.
You have men and ships. With you, we could mount a real defense.
And, of course, we can pay you with the surplus from our harvest.
Stop offering people surplus harvest, Gunner. That's what got you into this mess in the first place. And I like what Devra brings to this scene enough for it to be a yes, but it's still a no only because it sets something up that isn't paid off the way I think it should have been. She refers to the warship commanded by Atticus as the King's Gaze, labeling the ship itself as a world destroyer. Yet despite the odds, her brother Darian, played by Cyborg himself, Ray Fisher, agrees to help the group, asking for volunteers to stand with him. Imperator Furiosa steps up along with a few others, Devra leaves with the rest of the Blood Axes, and they're off again. No time to waste, gotta get to the end of the movie, boom boom boom, beep beep. But ooh, and also Atticus made his way to Sharon. This is a massive yes for the most part, because Ed's performance and his dialogue are both sufficiently cold, not in a generic mustache-twirling way, but in a way where you can tell he's a man of conviction who feels justified. So he is a yes, the ship is not. Listen to how he describes it.
Our king showed charity to an off-worlder like yourself and was slaughtered for his charity. So we named the ship to remind us of the power in that benevolent gaze. Was lost to charity. And to remember that if by God's will that gaze should fall upon us and be held, for even the briefest of moments, could change your life forever. Today it falls upon you.
That was the perfect tee-up for Atticus to walk away as the ship charged a weapon of such destruction, such power, that all we see is Levitica drenched in its light before it fires, decimating him and everything else in its path. Devra said it herself, the King's Gaze is a world destroyer. And what could possibly be more life-changing than witnessing the destruction of your world? Instead, they drained all the poetry out of Noble's speech by having him kill the king, which made no sense. It's like me pointing to a guillotine, saying, therein lies your final judgment, then shooting you in the face. The weapon itself was underwhelming too. Granted, you do see it leaving behind mini mushroom clouds, and as a lover of Fallout, I'd never deny the beauty of a fat man, which may sound weird to anyone who isn't a gamer, but I think it would have better lived up to the hype if it revved up to one huge mushroom cloud instead of a pew-pew like cannons on a pirate ship making little mushroom babies. Not to mention that light has a history of representing sight because it allows you to see, so something bright would have been more fitting for a ship called the King's Gaze. Just saying. Never fear, the obvious trap is here. The gang lands in Gondoval, and oh my, things go awry, because Kai sold them out. Yes, to the way the ship inches into frame like a sneaky snake while blasting the rebels to pieces, but no to pretty much everything else. Cobra Kai asked the rebels to carry crates that, unbeknownst to them, were those cool spider traps. Cora is standing next to one of them when it flings open and invades her space. Titus and Tarek get jump scared by another one, but it abruptly cuts to a spider grabbing Darien and just whipping his locks all over the place. Then one grabbed Nemesis, who was I don't know where, and Titus, who I guess got off screen. Now, I'm going to ignore the fact that for as long as the ship was firing, not a single one of them moved to take cover or get ready to fight. Not even Cora, who figured out before the first shot that it was an ambush. Because why critique how they were captured when how they escape is so much worse? So Atticus shows up, excited most by his prize catch Cora, the prodigal daughter of the very man he calls boss. And they decide to paralyze the group, which the spider traps allow them to do by shooting a bolt into the base of the neck. Kai tells Gunnar to paralyze Cora first, and this was a no because it was weird. He just kept whispering, "I know you can do it," in Gunnar's ear. Then he switched it up and said, "I know you're in love with her." What? If you know he loves her, why are you so sure he's going to pull the trigger? Why are you even saying that? Either way, Gunnar releases Cora from the spider and turns the bolt on Kai, then all hell breaks loose. And to the film's credit, they do show glimpses of people fighting on the fringe, and what looks to be Gunnar releasing the other rebels as Atticus fires on Cora. It just wasn't enough to me to explain how they managed to do that when they were surrounded by enemies with guns the whole time. All of this is no. How did this go through him and not her? Why does Darien already have a gun when he's released from the trap? Did they not take it from him? Did everyone keep their weapons? How are there any rebel ships left when all the King's Gaze did when it showed up was destroy them? Why are we cutting to Furiosa when Darien dies, as if they spent any time establishing their relationship outside of one throwaway line? Why is such an important ship able to be crashed by slamming down on one person's stick? Where did Cora go when she slid under the ship to catch up with Atticus? He was right in front of her, then the platform fell and she was nowhere in sight. You need to calm down, Zach. And this fight is goofy because I don't care how much of a military badass you are, if a dude slams your head into a metal pole, punches you in the face, then punches you in the stomach, you aren't flipping off the side of a platform and catching your weight on a rope. Compare this fight to the barn. That one didn't have that unrealistic trading of blows feel to it. Everyone who got hit reacted like someone who got hit, including Cora. And that's all I ask for with these kinds of fights, that we not depict those involved as being invincible when it's convenient. To be fair, Atticus is a bit iffy towards the end of the fight as well, but I'm not calling him out, not so much because he's a guy, but because he had holes in him. He's literally built different, okay? I don't know what that is. Also, what did she do with this cane here? She's pulling it down with a crunch, but it's not broken, so what did it do? Did it hit him? What was that sound effect? And I know I'm being a bit hard on it, so I'll give some of it a yes, because I really enjoyed the rope part of the fight. It had much better momentum to it, and it flowed with emotion, like Cora was really going at him fast and furious. But then she did this, and they actually did a close-up on it. Could they have at least tried to make it look like she was breaking his arm instead of him just bending his elbow? And sure, it's a yes to him saying this is perfect before she kills him, but it's a no to this still having 20 minutes left.
They believed in their cause. What better thing to die for? And I should have died with them.
I know a thing or two about the guilt of carrying on when those you sworn to fight with are gone.
No shit, Tarek, that literally just happened to you too. And I know he means before today, but it's also today. And were you just standing there watching Cora and Atticus fight the whole time? How did the platform Cora's on end up adjacent to them anyway, when it was below them, which is how she and Atticus fell on it in the first place? You know what? Let's head into the dark place for a chat. I'm aware that some of the things I complain about can be misconstrued as pointless nitpicking, but what I draw attention to speaks to larger issues I have with storytelling. When you make a film, you choose what to write and you choose what to show. None of it appears out of thin air. There are no goob goblins creeping around in the dead of night, randomly splicing footage into the final print behind your back or dropping clips into your file. So when your characters say something that doesn't make sense, or something happens that feels wrong, or the editing is just strange, you're responsible for that. And it reflects either a lack of attention to detail or a lack of concern for the quality of the story you're telling and how it's presented. My beef with the space buoy is that they chose to show us several times throughout the course of the fight that there was nothing around it. It may as well have been floating in a void, which was very effective at making Cora and Atticus feel isolated. Yet when the fight was over, when the tone of that setting was no longer needed, the buoy was now conveniently a stone's throw away. They also chose not to have the buoy shift around in response to all the movement from the fight. It didn't tilt when Cora flew over the side or float in the direction they banged into it. Yet when the fight was over, Tarek was able to pull it with a tuggy tug on a rope. All of the things I mentioned could have been incorporated into the fight. Have a control panel on the buoy. Atticus lands, takes in his surroundings, then heads to the panel to raise the buoy back up to safe ground, only hacha! He's interrupted by Cora dropping down on him. They fight, and on occasion the panel gets hit when one of them slams into it, causing the buoy to jolt up or down, left or right, tossing them around with it, adding another layer to the external threat, and making the fight more dynamic. Then we wouldn't need to know how Cora got back to the group when it was over. We'd see the buoy lift up to meet them, an exhausted Cora's hand on the panel, and a satisfied smirk on her face. That would have felt like there was continuity, a flow from one scene to the next, not like there was a scene, then another scene vaguely following it in chronology, which is how this movie reads from top to bottom, like things happening that kind of feel like they happened after the last thing, but how we got from point A to point B is anybody's guess.
Thanks, Gunnar. You know, I never did trust that pilot.
No, I don't know that, Tarek, because all of you interacted with each other none of the time. But you know what? It's fine.
That's our village.
Home.
Home. Never had a place to put to the word.
Except the planet you were born on, and the mother world you lived on, and also this same place, Cora. Also, Jimmy went feral for some reason. Now, you might think the movie is over, and would that it were, but it's not. I just can't anymore, so I'm done. If I had to summarize Rebel Moon in one phrase, it'd be running in place, because they rushed everything to get nowhere. I understand that Cora is the main character, but half of the time spent focusing on her could have been spent fleshing the rest of them out, making me care about them, and making them seem to care about each other. The fact that there's a second part coming doesn't excuse the paper-thin character development here. This isn't a television show with multiple episodes. It's a 2-part film. You need to front-load that shit. Another gripe I had that I didn't mention is that, barring instances where it's done for comedic effect, you shouldn't foreshadow something right before it happens. I think it deadens the impact, and I feel like Snyder foreshadowed things that happened in the very next scene, or close to it, several times. But I don't remember the examples I had, and I don't want to go back and look for them because I watched this movie twice now, and that's 3 times too many. So those were my thoughts on Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire. And I'm going to watch Part 2 when it releases on April 19th because I want to know how it ends. I might review it as well to be thorough and fair, but I'm not going to bother with the Snyder cuts. So let me know if you howled at Rebel Moon or if you enjoyed it. I have seen a few people, mostly Snyder fans, say that they loved it, and that's great. As always, my goal at Stream Come True is to share my passion for storytelling and encourage you to dive into all of the amazing and not so amazing content streaming near you. So if you want to watch Rebel Moon, which I recommend that you do, the links are in the box. Thank you very much for watching, subscribe on your way out, and good night, streamers.